Alright, new series to talk about. Build. Okay, how do we phrase this? This wasn't the best episode to open the series with. I think Shogo Muto, who is the head writer for the series, according to initial interviews, he's a longtime Kamen Rider fan, has been watching since he was a kid and watched with his kids, so kind of a legacy thing. Dude is something of a... He's more into normal Japanese dramas, which, hey, since Kamen Rider tries to stylize itself as a drama, that's not such an odd thing. He's most known for the movies Crow Zero and Crow Zero 2. Ironically, I'll be reviewing the Lupin the Third 2014 film at the beginning of November, and several of the actors in Crow Zero were also part of that movie, so I kind of had to look into the film for a bit for research purposes regarding those actors, and it's an okay movie and sequel. Not really my cup of tea, but it's serviceable for what it is. I didn't have a lot of problems with it, so, you know, he's not a bad writer going in, so we don't have a potential ninja situation. It's just that the flow of things feels different. A lot of the dialogue feels awkward, and there are a bunch of quirks that kind of annoyed me, but hey, those aren't series-breaking things with it starting out. They're just things that seem kind of dumb. One of them is the central character of the series. I'm going to be terrible with names because Sento Kiryu, like, he's showing off how cool his new bike is because it transforms from his phone, and it's like, he's gushing over it at how amazing it is, except he's the one who created it. It's like, and it's in this, the way it's acted, the way it's presented, the way it's directed is, he's gushing over how amazing this thing he's never seen is, but he's the one who made it. You see the disconnect with that? Yeah. It has that kind of thing all over the episode. I don't really want to knock Sento's actor, Atsuhiro Inukai, who has previously starred in television drama Ao no Umi Long Summer along with Hidenori Tokiyama and Itsuji Tao. Huh. Oh yeah, Kamen 15. I was trying to figure out where that one was from. And he was also in it with Hayato Onizuka. So yeah, he has familiarity with the series, and his favorite Rider series is Kamen Rider Kabuto, which, fair enough. I'll actually hopefully be getting to that one next year, and it is the best thing Shoji Onomura's wrote for the franchise, so not gonna knock him for that. But yeah, it seems like I really don't think he's a bad actor, but there are definitely a few odd moments where you can tell they're just still trying to fit into it, and I really, really hope what they did with Sento's bike, they don't do for the rest of the power-ups in the show, especially since he is creating them. He is making his own driver, he is creating all the full bottles by absorbing the monsters of the series, which is very, I don't want to say different, as we've kind of had that before with O's, and not technically Fours, not technically Ghosts. I know there's another one where they've done that before, but no, it wasn't Wizard. Well, technically we could count Wizard, considering he got all his magic rings. I know someone else did it aside from O's. I'm completely blanking on what it was, though. So pretty much the series opens with the revelation that 10 years before the series, they sent an single-man probe that made it all the way to Mars, which, considering current projects to try and actually get a livable habitat on Mars, that's not so out there. It is in the propensity to do, it just costs a lot of money, and the tech for doing it longer term isn't exactly feasible at the moment for us in the real world. In the Toeiverse, they've got super tech all over the place. But on their landing site, they found a odd box, which they decided to call Pandora's Box, because after they arrived on the planet, some idiots in the audience of the press conference barged past security and touched the top of it. Why he did that, I'm betting, is he was not actually, since they kept his face hidden. I see two options going forward with this. The first is that it's actually Sento in his amnesia stage, because we are operating with a character that has amnesia, despite his super genius. Or two, some type of protector or awakened evil that had his race debilitated in some form by the Pandora's Box, and it opening like this is part of their mastermind scheme. I'm just speculating from first episode evidence that is probably going to become relevant later. But it split Japan in three from this central point where it opened up this sky wall, where it raised a stone platform, and then between those platforms it radiates some type of energy, and essentially split the country into three different ruling districts. One more socialist, one rampant capitalism, and one outright pacifist. Here's my question. Why? Why would it divide the ideologies between ruling classes and split the country in three into, like, pseudo-warring states? It wouldn't at all, because you can have a united country, you can have a united state without with having complete land divides. America has that with Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico, and other territories where segregated. I'm forgetting the specific term for countries or states under United States stewardship, like Puerto Rico, where they're not officially a state, but they are a held territory. That seems kind of mean. So, it should still be one united Japan, because the sky wall only goes out so far in these divides, so the ships could literally move around it. The planes could fly around it. In fact, that's the logic for this happening 10 years ago, and yet no one talking about it. It's an aspect of everyday life. Why argue about it? Because the only thing it would really affect is, one, people who lost their homes, two, driving across and past these sky walls, because you wouldn't be able to pass a physical barrier, so you'd have to take a ship. And that's the third thing, travel restrictions. You need to go by ferry ship around it, or have the plane arc around it. So, it's the rational justification for why, if it's existed 10 years back and now retroactively being counted in, why previous series could hand wave away not really discussing it or needing to discuss it at all, because it's not something that they, with their respective power sets, could do nothing about, and, all of that jazz. So, it's like, the sociological, economical, pacifistic ideology split makes no sense from a greater world perspective, because there's no actual physical... Okay, there is an actual physical barrier, but there's no actual... How's the way to phrase this? They are all still Japan. You can still move between any of these different divided districts. It just takes longer to get there. They're not completely isolated like, say, the walls in Attack on Titan isolating the outside world from this super city-states that, of course, those barriers can be broken down because they're just physical barriers, but you get my point. It's meant to be, you're not suffering total isolation from any other state or region. You're just having a travel distance issue, because you can't do the straight line, you have to go around. It feels like I'm repeating myself. It's just that I found this really dumb to segregate different political, sociological, ideological stateships through these ways when there's no reason for them to develop that way. There's no reason to have different ruling or governmental policies for something that other people from those other regions can access at any time. Okay? See, this is the dumb stuff of the series with how that's divided up. And if they go somewhere with it, I'm not gonna care, but just from a greater franchise perspective, it's something that hasn't mattered, nor something that in context thus far should matter from how everything is going with it. And how should I phrase this? If they do something with it, that is completely different. If they have these things matter to the story, then it's justified ultimately. But they're in, I think, the pacifist district right now, where they're more focused on researchers instead of capitalism run wild. And as a result, we have robot bodyguards, and most of our protagonists are going to be revolving around the Toto Institute of Advanced Matter Physics, who are in charge of researching the Pandora's box to solve the issue of, removing the sky wall and fixing all that crap. In comes Sento Kiryu, who has just been... Sento Kiryu, who has just applied to work at the Institute. He has been an amnesiac, taken in by the owners of the Nashita Cafe, Soichi Isurugi and his daughter Misora, who have pretty much set him up, give him an allowance, and apparently Soichi's a bit of a okay, he's not a complete con man, but he has been keeping track of all the back rent he's due by Sento for staying with him, which he's only just revealed to Sento that he owes. So, kind of a dick, but, it's a bit more realistic than some of the other ones where they've had a character crash there and not had them actually pay for room and board. I'm thinking more Haruto in his crashing at the guy who made his rings and owns the antique shop, as no, I gotta change that phrasing. Haruto had money from being a soccer player, so he probably just paid rent. You can't use this justification for Eiji Hino either, because his room and board was included as part of working for Kusir, so that's another one where that doesn't work. Tsukasa Kadoya and him crashing at the Photoshop, not Photoshop, the cafe and photography center that's the Hikari Zone, like Hikari Studio, that was it. That doesn't work either because he actually worked for the Hikari Studio. So, what other ones we have? Kota lived with his sister, subplot about getting a job so he could start helping with their finances, so that doesn't work because he had just transitioned into adulthood and could legally get a job, so no. And, before they completely abandoned that subplot, that was a running thing about him, so which showed his respective responsibility, even though his sister was a jackass, but... Oh, and can't forget the idiot line, too, when her own actions caused the Invest to actually find people who were hiding out because she drew them straight to them. I really didn't like Kota's sister. So, let's see. Who else do we have on the list? Shinosuke? No, he had a job. Gentaro? No, he was a teenager, thus underage, thus lived with his grandfather. Let's see. Takeru was the owner of the Tenkuji Temple, so that doesn't apply. And last series, Emu was fully employed, so no, we've got our first actual case of a character being I guess this actually reads badly against him being a freeloader instead of, assisting and helping the cafe that he's staying under for room and board, especially since he seems, with all his invention stuff that we're already seeing, that have to be costing money, have to be costing supplies and resources on top of just room and board, so, why wouldn't it be helped out at the cafe to, cover his rents? It would seem like if it's a two-person place, not two-person place, if the cafe is only run by two people, why wouldn't it be helping out in the interim? And, Soichi just encouraging him to go to work for this center in hopes that, since he's got all these physical, technical stuff that, would be a better application of his abilities than hiding out and just building this stuff for himself. Admittedly, I do like the fact that he is creating his own equipment, except he's also not, because Misora also has some factor into the creation of new full bottles. Okay, I'm reading the wiki. She has the ability to purify Smash materials. Smash are the kaiju in the series that, when they're defeated, Sento can put in an empty full bottle to purify the person infected by their power for his own use. And, okay, yeah, this explains a bit about Misora's abilities. Doesn't explain how she has that ability. The show doesn't even address her having that ability. They just first present her as coming out of a room that Sento has made that also has a container, had the previous container of a Smash he defeated in the opening of the episode, which gives him the Hedgehog full bottle. And it's not related how she is doing that either. It's just that she comes out of a room, and attached to the room was a container with the full bottle we saw him grab earlier that's now properly empowered for his use. It doesn't really imply this purification power, and the fact it has to be on the wiki, and had to be in a news brief to be on the wiki, it is not related in the first episode for something that would seem kind of like a big deal, is an issue. Again, something they can look back on in a following episode as they more present things, as most of the episode revolves around Ryuga Banjo, a former martial artist who was framed for a crime he didn't commit, murdering a physicist who I presume was working on the Pandora's Box project, or something. They didn't actually go into specifics about that. But missing presumed dead scientist and Sento being an amnesiac, what are the odds that this presumed dead scientist and Sento are the same person, and Ryuga was just part of a cover-up because both of them appear to have been experimented on by the Smash. They both have shared memories of these guys in gas masks submerging him in a tank and doing things to him. Sento's memory was wiped, aside from a few scattered memories about that specific moment, and one bat-themed monster, which we know from the preview information as Night Rogue. They haven't exactly said it in the series yet, so I'm not sure how they're pronouncing it. Which is, of course, the traditional bat-themed kaiju. And the dude looks awesome. Seriously, it's a mix of straight-on Batman with the chest emblem and Kamen Rider Knight with the kind of bat-shaped visor. It actually looks, the visor looks more like the normal Batman emblem as opposed to the one on his chest, but it's pseudo-transparent so you can see the shape of eyes behind it, and otherwise he's very mechanical looking, like the other two Smash in the episode presumed to be. But upon the chase for him, they mutually discover this connection that Sento wants to learn more of, and thus he helps him out, especially since a Smash, I have no idea why that's the name of the monsters this series, I hope they really elaborate on that more, comes after him, and the one that did it, the two ones we've seen this episode are the Needle Smash and the Strong Smash. The Needle Smash, at the beginning of the episode, was going after a reporter named Sawa Takigawa, who was interviewing the other members of the... I guess I really should have recognized her. She, Saki Takigawa, the reporter lady, is played by, Yukari Taki, who was Ao Katsuragi in Double Returns Axel. Anyways, that was a pretty interesting way to set this up, where you have the short introductory thing for Build at the beginning of the episode with this unrelated case to get him the Hedgehog power-up, to set up how Build should be gaining all of his power-ups this series, with any luck. Just, it'll be a progressive thing coming from defeating the monsters of the week, which gives them a bit more relevance, and admittedly is some kind of how XI did it, and like I also said, how O's did it, but O's kind of did the whole, constantly changing hands of metals thing, which I doubt Build will be doing with its power-ups. Anyways, the Strong Smash is, like, all power, but little intelligence. It's like, it seemed kind of like a slave entity and not really, doing things of its own will. Fact proven later when, after Sento defeats it, it reverts into a human form, and the human guy that behind it was just an empty shell, more or less. Like, didn't remember anything, had this doohickey on his ear, and, like, didn't know what he was doing. So, he was left in a state similar to Sento was, which all the more infers that that was the logical intended end for both Ryuga and Sento himself. Ryuga, because of his martial arts ability, broke out amidst the experimentation on him. So, which is a bit of a twist, since they're trying to invoke Ichigo and Nigo. Yet again, they're trying to go back to Showa elements in the series. Now, I'm not completely against this, but several last series, to differing extents, have tried to do the let's make it like the Showa era, and, like, you don't do this well in Heisei. The only one that has done it well has been Double. Any movie, any event trying to involve the Showa heroes or invocations of them outside of Riku Sanjo's work has been notorious as blowing up in Toei's face eventually. So, and of course, like, they're trying to assert, this is Kamen Rider back at its best. After a really successful series, seriously, XI ended up winning some awards for sales and story presentation. I think it's a bit overblown, but XI overall was a good series and worthy of the Kamen Rider branding due to its use of the recurring thematics of the series, even though it didn't do the direct invocation. In fact, doing the direct invocation is part of my problem, because we've done that story. We've done the people experimented on, and you know, it really got old in the show era, because you had 10 full series that pretty much pulled the same gambit to varying extents. Admittedly, Amazon and Super 1 played with it differently, as did V3, and that's 3 of the better Showa era entries right there, where they, you know, like, avoided playing to type. I guess the idea is, since we haven't really done it this way in so long, that it's okay to do it, but it's still played out in the franchise, is my concern, and, you know, what used to work doesn't always work now, or so much time has passed, differences in presentation or ideological stands can make that not as pleasant. Hell, we just had the whole blown up issues about Amazons is kind of a bigger invocation of how you can screw that up. But admittedly, again, first episode. It's, if they go somewhere with it, if they use it well, that's fine. So something that irritates some, these things that I think are problems or potential issues might not end up being them in the long run. I don't know. It's like first episode musings. But anyways, Build fights the strong Smash and pretty much outwits it, even though he has, like, 2 combinations right now. Full bottles are divided into halves. You use 2 to transform, and then each one is locked to a side. One is based on some form of animal, the other is based on some type of thing or technology. So, with 3 bottles in hand, Sento can only access 2 forms. He only has 1 item bottle, which is Tank, and the 2 animal bottles, which are Rabbit and Hedgehog. Hedgehog having a kind of pseudo-armament where his entire right arm and... Okay, they didn't have anything for his left leg because it's kind of like crossing over. So right arm and left leg have the animal power-up. The left arm and right leg have the item power-up to mixing match, crossing over the powers. Visually it works, and I really liked his transformation sequence where the armor would build itself up, inject itself out into a kind of plastic model gunplay form, and then they just press themselves onto Sento's body. That was like, it's a bit too elaborate. It really seems like a Rube Goldberg machine kind of thing, which, hey, in the previews of the series, Sento is shown building Rube Goldberg machines, but the problem with the whole Rube Goldberg machine is they're impractical, and this kind of plays a bit into Sento's character as I see it, as he seems to enjoy impractical things, except impractical things are not good for science. It's like, impractical things exist in defiance of science. A good engineer can build something simplistic. A bad engineer builds something completely overly complicated to perform the same task. It's the entire point of Rube Goldberg machines. They look cool, they're really awe-inspiring when they work right, but they're impractical because they rarely work right. What you see in videos about them is the one time that they actually got it right in the full sequence. Like, the Mythbusters did a whole episode about building ridiculous Rube Goldberg machines and their difficulties in getting it to work. So, a reliable Rube Goldberg machine-esque creation, that's a feat of genius, but one that is pretty impractical since in the modern age you can just program a few electronics and smaller motorized parts to do the same action. So, this is a reflection of Sento's character, though, in all of this, because his watch, instead of having numbers, are all mathematical formulas. Now, this admittedly is showing that Sento is smart, but he's also ridiculously eccentric to the point of detracting from himself. Now, I get the idea, since they're trying to homage the past Kamen Riders series of the Neo Heisei era, since Build is going to be the last Neo Heisei era, last series of the Neo Heisei era, since Emperor Heisei is stepping down at the end of the year, but this isn't really reflective of how Philip worked, because, okay, with all types of mathematics, you have to write out long formulas and do a lot of computations, but as a former chemistry student, the logic behind a lot of it is you have it out there full on, but then you simplify everything you're doing into smaller steps, because if you just do this one long thing in order, you're going to get lost, you're going to screw up your process in, well, processing it. That was pretty much day one of my college courses, and pretty much every time I had any real class with science, mathematics, and whatnot, they underlined the point, keep it simple, stupid. Because it is so easy to screw up something the longer and more elaborate it gets. You need to break it down to process it. So, is this showing Sento as intelligent by having all of these things in the show that are masterworks of his genius? Sure. But they're not showing him as smart. It's like, a smart person wouldn't need... a smart person would take advantage of all of these shortcuts and simplicities so they could have more time to focus on, like, actual things that more mattered. Like, you take the extra second or two to process something out of equations that mean the same thing as a simplified number than you would just having a watch with a simplified number. It's kind of a joke, it's kind of a gag, but it's reflected the Rube Goldberg machine where he doesn't really he's not taking the easy route, but he's making things more complicated than they need to be with everything. So, that's a reflection on the character that isn't really being depicted in Sento's actor's performance of his role, and it's not really reflective of what we've seen of Sento yet beyond those things, but it's like, it's not the same as Philip's knowledge lookups. That is admittedly also an eccentricity, but him writing out everything, that's so he could get it out of his head. Using formulas like this, making the Rube Goldberg machines, the logical formulas in the air, that's keeping it all in his head, and that overcomplicates something, even for a ridiculously intelligent person. The formulas in the air thing happened right as Build was transforming, because physics. And it's like, you're showing him as smart, but you're not showing him as having much... Okay, I keep revolving around this point and how I want to best phrase it. He doesn't seem to have common sense, is the bottom line, because the common sense way of doing a lot of this would be to, like, make it best to quickly process it. Because the point of breaking things down into simpler steps is you process it faster when you have a logical directive. Go from point A to point Z, not have it point A to B, break it down into smaller things, and you process it faster. See where I'm going with this? I hope I do, because I feel like I've been hitting the same point over and over again. Rider kick. He kicks the ground and with the tank side of his body, and a divot falls into the ground, and then a mathematical formula manifests and binds the monster, and then he raises out on this platform of Earth to then jump, and it's like, this didn't work for me, and pretty much for the same reasons as before. It's eccentricities and impracticality. As part of the jump is you're taking advantage of momentum, inertia, and gravity to accelerate your movements into a impact you would have that is stronger as you're putting the force of everything you have behind it into it. So the reason why I critique so horribly Ryuki's rider kick is he bled off all inertia, he bled off all force, so the only force of the attack he ended up having was Drag Redder's Dragon Breath, which launched him into the monster, enemy Kamen Rider, whatever. This was fixed with Ryuga's version of the rider kick, as he actually put his own force and inertia behind it before he got hit by Drag Blacker's Dragon Breath. So it actually had more force behind it from everything depicted. Sento has much of the same problem. He's not reaching the apex of the force he could apply with his rider kick, and it's even worse as that mathematical curve. Yeah, the way it curves, it's designed to bleed off energy, so it's actually much less effective than it would have been had he just jumped in the air with the rabbit powers and then came down to hit him with the tank side of his body. So, again, it's showing him as cool and super smart, and, but it's effectively impractical and less effective than it would have been otherwise, like, in comparison to other riders with the same thing. Especially since he's putting all the force at the tip of his toe, and if you're kicking someone, yeah, no, that's really not how you should be kicking them. All the force you're putting behind it is focused onto one point, but that's actually more damaging to the person doing it than more force is applied on a single point than spreading it out, but it's a matter of being able to resist the damage of the impact. You can actually apply more force as you're then, if you're going from just the ball of your foot then having its impact fully, because it's technically two hits, one with all the force, and then the movement of your foot to then hit you with your heel is your side absorbing the force of impact and then applying it back onto what you're hitting. At least that was how I was taught it years ago. So again, in practicality for the sake of coolness and against him supposedly being this super smart character. Again, this is more visuals and direction than narrative issues that are kind of contradicting all that. But to wrap the episode, they are put on the run as Ryuga is tracked down by the Toto head, Gentoku Himuro, who actually was behind most of the early exposition, and he is also the prime minister of the Toto region that they are in. I don't remember all the names of everything, because first episode on that with names, but there's something off about this guy. There's really something that's, I don't want to say unnerving, but I feel like he's keeping secret despite him being the viewpoint character for all the narrative explanation. Like, he's head of this research institute, and there are these monsters out there that are committing horrific experiments. He is also the primary law keeper, and he wants to shut down this escapee without actually learning anything about the situation he was in. So, is he actually going to turn out to be the prime villain? Or is he just, like, someone that is very misguided and overtaken by his own duties to be distrustful to others and whatnot in there? That's actually a question I'm wanting to see answered, as Ryuga is then saved by Sento because, he needs the information about his memory. So, that pretty much wraps the first episode, with the next one premiering a few more forms, but how would I rate it? Honestly, frustrating. Kamen Rider's had this issue the last few years of, while structurally good, the first arc ends up irritating in some respect, and either that'll end up like Ghost and end up a compounding of errors, or it'll be like Drive and Excite, where they completely lose the early problems once they get more chances to flesh out the storytelling, because it was only so full of issues because of how the scheduling was strangling their ability to tell the stories they wanted. So, Build is no longer suffering under that restriction. They've got 4 more episodes before the winter movie event, due to it starting in September again, finally, because Kamen Rider hasn't had that happen since Gain. They're also going to be moving to a later time slot soon, so they'll be able to not be as restricted by the children's entertainment block windows that have been a contentious issue with, like, what they could show as part of the series for a couple years since the last time parent groups complained, and Toei had to tell them, yeah, you need to dial it back for this time slot. So, less constrained, they might be able to get away with it more again, instead of having it all, what's the phrase? Have to nudge, nudge, wink, wink, the super dark, uber dark elements. So I'm not going to rate this show as bad yet. I'd say check it out, but damn, is there going to be issues? I'm hoping that they'll iron a bunch of these out. I hope they'll not, like, use the physics stuff dumbly like this. I hope they, like, make it reflect Sento's character instead of quirks that are not a credit to him or the show, but it's Toei. They have a high likeliness of screwing this up. Q Ranger is good evidence of that. Anything else I have for this one? I really like Bill's design. I really do. I want the show to be good. I hope that Toei's continuance of trying new blood will help them there. I've been going at this for a while, so let me just be quick about Ultraman Geed this week. I seem to have swapped the two again. But, yeah. Zero Beyond. That's pretty much what the episode was about. And more, I should rephrase. It's more about finding the resolve of a hero after someone you know, someone you care about, sacrifices themselves for others. And for Leito, it's just him trying to find the will to protect while everyone else is in shock at what Kei set in motion to simply get him out of the way. A bit more context is given to this in that what prompted his actions is that this is all about Geed and Geed's story of becoming a hero in a more meta context, and that is what's happening in the show, even though that is what the show is about. So it's like you're crossing the streams a bit and tapping on the fourth wall. So all of this was so Kei could get Zero out of the way for just Geed to be the solo hero and challenge him, but the Ultraman aren't having any of that. Well, Zero is revealed to not be dead. He just put himself on such a low... He's just had so little power left after saving Reita. He seemed to be dead, and Reito finding his own resolve as a hero helped reawaken him within Reito's soul, but he's still pretty damn weak. In comes Ultraman Hikari out of literally the fuck out of nowhere to give him 4 Ultra Capsules that he then fuses together. The ones for Ginga, X, Victory, and Orb. The 4 most recent Ultra series that began as part of Ultraman Retsuden, and then we've had the Ultra Fight side projects where it's just been fights and backstory and actors on sets. So I know little about any of those series and characters, but the commonality between all of them is they are heroes who were ultimately defined by them taking on the powers of the previous Ultra series characters, or being the first one to fuse 2 different characters, and Orb and Victory both having their powers defined by cards. If I'm remembering correctly, it's Ginga and X that had them defined by the Spark Dolls, which were like Ranger Keys, which also stored various Ultra and Kaiju's powers. Again, I haven't watched those series, so I don't know much about them, but by them being defined by previous users' powers, it wouldn't make sense for them to have much of their own unique powers, since that's the limitation of a character that relies on prior powers. Their own power set outside of those are far more limited. And this seemed to show as all it ended up doing is advance Zero's own powers. He has more head blades, he has more energy projection abilities. He has differing armoring. He actually looks kind of cool, honestly, if albeit bland in his color scheme, which is a bit poorly contrasting against Geed, who has all of his forms so far be a bit more dynamic, and Zero originally was a pretty good color balance between red, blue, and silver, which is now lost here. So, give and take. Stylization is definitely a bigger promoted element here, but color palette is definitely lacking. Ultraman Hikari showing up for this little Deus Ex Machina to give him a fusion riser and the capsules, though. I like it more than had they just come out of nowhere, but if Ultraman Hikari is around, then why is he not helping? I mean, was this just a care package from the Ultra family and, rephrase, the Ultra Legion? I'm not sure if... I'm pretty sure Zero's not part of the royal family in all this, but, it's like, you had him appear, another Ultra around for support. Is he not sticking around? Did he have another job? It felt like, I must go now, my people need me, after just showing up for a couple seconds, so that annoys me a bit. But regardless, K's plan? What was his plan? Was thwarted, as together the two take care of both of the giant monsters that showed up here, especially the one from the last episode, whose name I am forgetting, and as I'm wrapping this up, I really don't care to look it up. But it kind of this again shows my thing from last episode, where Riku has form change, and the way they actually beat the monster this week, despite them early in the episode saying they tried 17 different ways to beat it and none of them worked, in simulation, and then form change, bam, instant win. Don't do that. It's like, I know there's a rule about using your best weapon immediately is going to show that it won't work, but if you're going to show someone as completely outmatched and they have form change and those forms will then be used to beat this super strong enemy, then show them using the other forms and taking another tactic that doesn't work instead of just relying on the one base form that from the beginning won't work. It's like, that's the violation of the entire form change gimmick. To not use it, and then lose, and then use it in a rematch, is like, it defeats the purpose of the earlier fight. Ugh. So yeah, that's it for me this week. I've been saying it for the last few weeks, but, this time I'm gonna mean it. I'm gonna take a few weeks off from doing the vlogs. I really need the time for other things that I should be doing. And I'll be keeping track of the show, and I'll try and get back to build around episode 5 and get my thoughts on episodes 2 through 4. It's like, I don't want to stay away from doing these for too long, as then I will not be able to catch up with actually discussing and recapping stuff. So, yeah. I'm gonna be a bit more bare on content again for a while. And sorry about that, guys, but real life calls. See y'all later.